Moonmarked. Thank you for listening to Moonmarked. Please subscribe so you never miss a new story. Chapter 1: The Awakening. The dreams had been getting stronger. Sera Blackwood pressed her palms against her bedroom window, watching the full moon hang like a silver coin against the midnight sky. Her skin felt too tight, as if something inside her was trying to claw its way out. The sensation had been building for weeks now, ever since her 21st birthday 3 months ago. Another sleepless night? She spun around to find her roommate Maya standing in the doorway, concern etched across her features. Maya had been patient with Sera's increasingly erratic behavior, the midnight pacing, the sudden disappearances into the woods behind their small rental house, the way Sera's eyes sometimes seemed to glow in dim light. "I can't shake this feeling," Sera whispered, her voice hoarse. "Like something's calling to me." Maya stepped closer, her dark eyes filled with worry. "Sera, you're scaring me. Maybe we should see a doctor." A howl pierced the night air, long and mournful, cutting through Maya's words like a blade. Both women froze. The sound seemed to vibrate through Sera's bones, awakening something primal and wild within her chest. Her heart began to race, and she felt that familiar tingling sensation spread across her skin. "Did you hear that?" Sera breathed. Maya's brow furrowed. "Hear what?" Another howl answered the first, closer this time. Sera's hands trembled as she gripped the windowsill. She could hear it so clearly, not just the sound, but the emotion behind it. Longing. Recognition. A call meant specifically for her. "I have to go," she said suddenly, pushing past Maya toward the door. "Sera, no. It's past midnight, and you're not thinking clearly." But Sera was already grabbing her jacket, her movements urgent and instinctive. The pull she felt was stronger than anything she'd ever experienced, like an invisible cord wrapped around her soul, tugging her toward the forest. She couldn't resist it any more than she could stop breathing. "I'll be back," she called over her shoulder, ignoring Maya's protests as she slipped out into the cool October night. The moment her bare feet touched the damp earth, everything changed. Her senses exploded with new awareness. She could smell the individual scents of pine, oak, and maple, could hear the scurrying of small creatures in the underbrush, could see with startling clarity despite the darkness. The world had become hyperreal, painted in shades of silver and shadow. She ran toward the tree line, her legs carrying her faster than should have been possible. The forest welcomed her like an old friend, branches parting to create a path she somehow knew by heart. Her bare feet found purchase on rocks and roots with feline grace, never stumbling, never hesitating. Deeper into the woods she went, following the invisible thread that seemed to emanate from her very core. The howls grew louder, more frequent, creating a symphony that made her blood sing with recognition. She wasn't afraid, she should have been terrified, racing through dark woods toward unknown dangers, but instead she felt more alive than she ever had. A clearing opened before her, bathed in moonlight so bright it might have been daylight. And there, standing in the center like something from a dream, was the most magnificent wolf she had ever seen. He was massive, easily twice the size of any natural wolf, with silver-gray fur that seemed to catch and hold the moonlight. His eyes were the color of amber honey, and they fixed on her with an intelligence that was unmistakably human. When their gazes met, Sera felt the world tilt on its axis. "Mine," something deep within her whispered. "He's mine." The wolf took a step forward, and Sera found herself moving to meet him, no longer in control of her own body. They approached each other slowly, cautiously, like dancers in some ancient ritual. When they were close enough to touch, the wolf sat back on his haunches and simply watched her. Sera reached out with trembling fingers and touched the soft fur at the crown of his head. The moment their skin made contact, images flooded her mind, flashes of memory that weren't her own. A young man with amber eyes and dark hair, laughing as he ran through these same woods. The same man, older now, standing before a pack of wolves as they bowed their heads in respect. Pain. Loss. The ache of searching for something, someone, for years upon years. Sera. Her name whispered through her consciousness, though the wolf's mouth never moved. "I've been waiting for you." She jerked her hand back, stumbling backward. "This isn't real. This can't be real." The wolf's form began to shimmer and blur, like heat rising from summer pavement. Sera watched in fascination and terror as the creature's body elongated and shifted, for receding to reveal bronze skin, for legs becoming two, muzzle shortening into a distinctly human face. Within moments, where the wolf had been, now knelt a man. He was breathtaking in the way that dangerous things often were, all lean muscle and sharp edges, with high cheekbones and a jaw that could have been carved from granite. His dark hair fell across his forehead in waves, and those amber eyes that had captivated her in wolf form now studied her with an intensity that made her feel exposed. "Hello, Sera," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to resonate in her chest. "My name is Kieran Blackthorne. And you, little wolf, have finally come home." "Little wolf?" She shook her head frantically. "I'm human. I'm completely, totally human." Kieran rose to his feet with fluid grace, apparently unconcerned by his nakedness. Sera tried very hard not to notice the play of muscle beneath his skin or the way moonlight carved shadows across his broad chest. "Your sense says otherwise," he said gently. "As does your ability to hear our call and find this place. Tell me, Sera, have you been having dreams? Feeling different lately?" The knowing look in his eyes made her stomach clench. "How do you know my name?" "Because I've been searching for you for 5 years. Because you're my mate, and I've felt the pull of the bond since the moment you came of age." He took a step closer, and she caught his scent, pine and smoke and something wild that made her mouth water. "Because you're not human, darling. You're one of us." "That's impossible." But even as she said it, she could feel the lie in her bones. The dreams, the restlessness, the way she'd run through the forest with inhuman speed, it all made terrible sense. "Your parents never told you?" Kieran's expression darkened. "They never explained what you were?" "My parents are dead." The words came out sharper than she'd intended. "They died in a car accident when I was 16. I've been on my own since then." Pain flashed across his features. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." He was quiet for a moment, then continued more gently. "There are things you need to understand. About what you are, about why you're here. About us." "Us?" Her voice cracked on the word. "Mates, Sera. You and I are destined to be together. It's written in the stars, in the moon's pull, in the very essence of what we are." His eyes softened. "I know it's overwhelming. I know you're frightened. But please, let me help you understand." A cool breeze swept through the clearing, and Sera suddenly became aware that she was standing in a forest in the middle of the night with a naked stranger who claimed to be a werewolf. And that some part of her, a part that was growing stronger by the moment, believed every word he said. "This is insane," she whispered. Kieran's mouth curved into the ghost of a smile. "The best things usually are." Before she could respond, another howl echoed through the forest, followed by several more. These sounded different from the ones that had called to her, sharper, more aggressive. Kieran's entire demeanor changed in an instant. His body went rigid, muscles coiling with tension, and his nostrils flared as he scented the air. When he looked at her again, his amber eyes had gone hard as stone. "We need to leave. Now." "What's wrong?" "The Shadowfawn pack." The words came out like a curse. "They've found you." Without waiting for her response, Kieran grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the edge of the clearing. The moment their skin touched, that electric connection sparked between them again, stronger this time. Sera felt power flowing through the contact. His power, lending her strength and speed she'd never possessed. They ran together through the forest, Kieran leading her along paths that seemed to appear and disappear at will. Behind them, she could hear the sound of pursuit, heavy paws thundering against the earth, branches snapping, the occasional snarl of frustration when they lost the scent. "Who are they?" Sera gasped as they leaped over a fallen log. Enemies, Kieran replied grimly. They've been trying to claim our territory for years. If they get their hands on you, especially now, before you've fully awakened. He didn't finish the thought, but the implication hung in the air like a threat. They burst from the tree line near her house, and Sera could see Maya's silhouette in the living room window, pacing frantically. Relief flooded through her at the sight of normalcy, of her human life waiting just yards away. I should go back, she said, slowing. Maya will be worried sick, and I need to think about all this. Kieran spun to face her, his hands gripping her shoulders. Sera, listen to me. You can't go back to that life. Not anymore. The moment you heard the call, the moment you came into the forest, everything changed. The Shadowfang pack knows about you now. They'll be watching, waiting for another chance. But Maya will be safer if you're not there. His eyes were intense, almost desperate. Please. Come with me. Let me protect you while you learn to protect yourself. The sound of howls grew closer, and Sera could see shapes moving at the edge of the forest. Large shapes with glowing eyes that reflected the moonlight. I can't just disappear, she said, even as fear began to creep up her spine. I have a job, responsibilities. You have a destiny, Kieran interrupted. And right now, you have a choice. Come with me willingly, or let the Shadowfang pack drag you away by force. As if summoned by his words, 3 enormous wolves emerged from the tree line. They were different from Kieran's wolf form, darker, more menacing, with red-rimmed eyes that spoke of violence and hunger. They fanned out in a semicircle, effectively cutting off any escape route except the one that led toward Kieran. The largest of the 3, a massive black wolf with scars crisscrossing his muzzle, began to shift. The transformation was less graceful than Kieran's had been, more violent, accompanied by sounds that made Sera's skin crawl. The man who emerged was tall and broad, with shoulder-length black hair and cold blue eyes. Unlike Kieran, he seemed to revel in his nakedness, wearing it like a weapon designed to intimidate. Well, he said, his voice carrying a thick accent she couldn't place. The little lost lamb finally surfaces. Stay back, Marcus, Kieran warned, moving protectively in front of Sera. She's under my protection. Marcus laughed, the sound like breaking glass. Your protection? You couldn't even find her for 5 years, Blackthorne. Some alpha you are. I'm warning you. You're warning me? Marcus's eyes began to glow with an inner fire. You forget yourself. This territory belongs to the Shadowfang now. Everything in it, including your precious mate. Sera felt something stirring inside her, a heat that began in her chest and spread outward through her limbs. The sensation was similar to what she'd experienced in the clearing, but stronger, more urgent. I don't belong to anyone, she heard herself say, her voice carrying a strength that surprised her. Marcus's attention shifted to her, and his smile turned predatory. Ah, she speaks. Tell me, little wolf, do you even know what you are yet? The heat inside Sera intensified, and she felt her vision sharpen until she could see every detail of Marcus's face, the thin scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw, the way his pupils dilated as he scented the air, the cruel curve of his mouth. She's learning, Kieran said tightly. And she's mine. Yours by what right? Marcus began to circle them, his movements predatory and deliberate. You've had 5 years to claim her, 5 years to bring her into the pack and complete the bond. Instead, you let her live as a human, ignorant of her heritage. His eyes fixed on Sera. Did you know, sweet thing, that unclaimed wolves are free territory? Fair game for any pack strong enough to take them? That's not how it works, Kieran snarled, but Sera could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Isn't it? Marcus stopped directly in front of him. The old laws are clear. A wolf who hasn't been claimed by their 22nd birthday reverts to free status. And unless my math is wrong, our little Sera here turns 22 in exactly 1 month. The blood drained from Sera's face. Her birthday was indeed in 1 month, October 31st, Halloween. The irony wasn't lost on her. You bastard, Kieran growled. You knew. You've been watching her, waiting. Of course I knew. Marcus's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp for a human mouth. The Blackthorne bloodline is legendary. Do you think I'd let such power slip through my fingers? Blackthorne? Sera looked between the two men, confusion adding to her growing fear. But my last name is... Your adoptive name, Kieran said quietly, never taking his eyes off Marcus. Your birth name was Sera Blackthorne. Your parents were members of my pack, my cousins, actually. When they died, you should have come to me, but... He trailed off, pain flickering across his features. But they made sure she disappeared first, Marcus finished gleefully. Knew you'd never be able to handle the responsibility of raising your destined mate from a child. Very wise of them, really. The implications hit Sera like a physical blow. Not only was she apparently a werewolf, but she was related to Kieran? And her parents had deliberately hidden her from him? This is too much, she whispered, pressing her hands to her temples. The heat inside her was becoming uncomfortable, like a fever building toward dangerous levels. Poor little lamb, Marcus crooned mockingly. So much to take in. Perhaps you'd prefer to come with us? We could take things slowly, help you adjust to your new reality with patience and care. The lie in his words was so obvious it made Sera's skin crawl. She might not understand what was happening to her, but every instinct she possessed screamed danger when she looked at Marcus. I'll die before I let you touch her, Kieran said, his voice dropping to a register that was barely human. That can be arranged. Marcus gestured to his companions, who began to shift back into wolf form with eager whines. The transformation this time was different. Sera could see it more clearly, could feel the magic that crackled through the air like electricity. Her own body responded to it, the heat inside her spiking until she gasped with the intensity. What's happening to me? She asked desperately. Kieran spared her a quick glance, and his eyes widened at whatever he saw in her face. You're beginning to shift. But it's too soon, you're not ready. Ready or not, it seems our little wolf wants to play, Marcus observed. His two companions had completed their transformation and now flanked him, lips pulled back to reveal massive fangs. The pain hit Sera like a lightning bolt, shooting through her bones and muscles. She doubled over with a cry, feeling her body begin to change in ways that defied comprehension. Her fingernails lengthened into claws, her canine teeth sharpened, and when she looked up, the world had exploded into a symphony of scents and sounds that threatened to overwhelm her. She could smell everything, the musk of the wolves, the ozone scent of approaching rain, the fierce sweat from Maya inside the house. She could hear her roommate's rapid heartbeat, could distinguish the sound from the slower, steadier rhythms of the wolves around her. And underneath it all, she could feel power building inside her like pressure in a boiler, seeking release. Magnificent, Marcus breathed. Even more beautiful than I hoped. Kieran moved then, his own transformation happening so quickly it was little more than a blur. One moment he was a man, the next he was the silver wolf she'd first encountered, positioning himself between her and the Shadowfang wolves with a snarl that made the air vibrate. The black wolf, Marcus in his shifted form, replied with a howl that spoke of challenge and dominance. The other two spread out, trying to flank them. Sera tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. The change was happening too fast, her body caught between human and wolf, trapped in a painful limbo that left her vulnerable and disoriented. Trust me, Kieran's voice whispered through her mind, and she realized with shock that she could hear his thoughts. Let the wolf come. Don't fight it. I don't know how, she thought back desperately. You do. It's in your blood, in your bones. Stop thinking like a human and feel like a wolf. Sera closed her eyes and tried to quiet the panic in her mind. Instead of fighting the sensations coursing through her body, she embraced them. The pain began to shift, becoming something else, not comfortable, but purposeful. Like her body was finally remembering how it was supposed to be. Her spine elongated, her jaw pushed forward, and thick fur sprouted across her skin in waves of silver and white. When she opened her eyes again, the world looked completely different. Colors were muted but textures were incredibly sharp. Scents painted detailed pictures in her mind. She could track each wolf's emotional state, could smell the metal tang of aggression and the sweet musk of fear. She rose on 4 legs that felt as natural as breathing, and realized she was smaller than the others, built for speed rather than brute strength, with a lean frame and long legs perfect for running. Marcus circled them both now, his massive form radiating menace. "Pretty little thing," his voice snarled through the psychic link that connected all shifted wolves. "I wonder how fast you can run." Before anyone could react, he lunged, not at Kieran, but directly at Sera. Instinct took over. Sera sprang aside with fluid grace, her new body responding with a speed that surprised even her. Marcus's jaws snapped shut on empty air where she'd been standing a split second before. But the other 2 Shadowfang wolves were already moving, trying to herd her toward the forest where they'd have the advantage of familiar territory. Kieran intercepted one of them with a collision that sent both wolves rolling across the grass, but the second one slipped past him. Sera found herself facing a brown wolf with yellow eyes and a chunk missing from his left ear. He was larger than her but not by much, and something in his posture told her he underestimated her because of her size. That was his first mistake. When he leaped, she didn't dodge. Instead, she met him head-on, using his momentum against him. They collided in a tangle of fur and claws, but Sera twisted at the last second, raking her claws across his exposed flank before dancing away. The brown wolf yelped in pain and surprise, blood darkening his fur. He turned to face her again, more cautious now, but Sera could smell his uncertainty. First blood. He abandoned his fight with Kieran and stalked towards Sera, every line of his body promising violence. This close, she could see the true size difference between them. He outweighed her by at least 50 pounds, and his jaws could probably crush her skull in a single bite. "Run," Kieran urged her desperately. "He's too strong. I'll hold them off." But something inside Sera rebelled at the idea of running. The wolf part of her that had finally awakened was proud and fierce, and it would not be cowed by threats. "No," she replied firmly. "I'm done running from things I don't understand." Marcus's laugh rumbled through the psychic connection. "Brave words, little wolf. Let's see if you can back them up." He came at her like a black avalanche, claws extended and fangs bared. But just before impact, Sera did something that surprised everyone present, herself included. She shifted. Not back to human form, but to something in between. Her wolf body stretched and changed, becoming larger, stronger, with muscle definition that spoke of power she'd never known she possessed. Her silver fur darkened to platinum, and when she met Marcus's charge, it was with strength that matched his own. They grappled in the moonlight like something from a primal legend, 2 forces of nature given physical form. Marcus had experience and skill, but Sera had something else, desperation, and the fury of someone who'd been lied to her entire life. "Impossible," Marcus snarled as she threw him off and landed gracefully on all 4 paws. "No wolf can shift forms during their first change." "This one can," Sera replied, her mental voice carrying a new confidence. The power flowing through her was intoxicating, like she'd been living her entire life with weights on her limbs and had suddenly been set free. She could feel Kieran's amazement through their bond, could sense his pride and something else. A deep, abiding love that made her heart race even in this deadly situation. "My mate," his voice whispered through her consciousness, warm as honey. "My strong, incredible mate." The moment of connection gave Marcus the opening he needed. He launched himself at her while she was distracted, his jaws clamping down on her shoulder with crushing force. Pain exploded through Sera's consciousness, followed immediately by rage so pure it burned like white fire. She twisted in Marcus's grip, ignoring the agony as his fangs tore through muscle and fur, and sank her own teeth deep into the soft flesh of his throat. Marcus released her with a strangled yelp, blood flowing freely from the wound. But before he could recover, Kieran was there, slamming into the black wolf with enough force to send him tumbling across the yard. "Enough!" Kieran's mental roar silenced everyone. This territory is protected by the old accords, Marcus. You have no right to hunt here. The accords are meaningless when there's no pact to enforce them, Marcus replied, but there was less confidence in his voice now. He was bleeding from multiple wounds, and his two companions looked equally battered. There is a pack, a new voice said. Everyone turned toward the forest, where a group of wolves had emerged from the shadows. There were at least a dozen of them, all bearing the silver and gray coloring that marked them as Kieran's people. Their leader, a massive silver wolf with intelligent dark eyes, padded forward with the measured gait of absolute authority. "Hello, nephew," the newcomer said, directing his words toward Kieran. "I see you've finally found your mate." Sera felt Kieran's shock ripple through their bond, followed by a complex mix of emotions, relief, wariness, and something that felt like old pain. "Uncle Tobias," Kieran replied carefully. "I thought the pack had disbanded after your parents died? After you disappeared for 5 years, abandoning your responsibilities?" The silver wolf's mental voice carried decades of accumulated disappointment. "Some of us never stopped believing you'd return when you were ready to lead." Marcus had backed away during this exchange, his yellow eyes darting between the newcomers as he calculated his odds. The arrival of a full pack had clearly shifted the balance of power, but he wasn't ready to concede defeat entirely. "This changes nothing," he snarled. "The female is still unclaimed. Still fair game." Tobias turned his dark gaze on the Shadowfang leader, and the temperature in the clearing seemed to drop several degrees. "Is she now?" Without warning, the older wolf began to shift. His transformation was unlike anything Sera had witnessed so far, smooth as silk, accomplished with the ease of decades of practice. When he stood before them in human form, she could see the family resemblance to Kieran in the strong jaw and amber eyes, though Tobias's hair was silver-streaked and his face bore the lines of someone who'd carried heavy burdens. "Marcus Bloodmoon," Tobias said, his voice carrying the authority of an alpha who'd never had his leadership questioned. "You're trespassing on Blackthorne territory." "Blackthorne territory?" Marcus had shifted back to human form as well, though he looked significantly less composed than Tobias. Blood still seeped from the wound Sera had given him. "There's been no Blackthorne Alpha for 5 years. This land reverted to neutral ground." "Did it?" Tobias smiled, but there was nothing warm about the expression. "According to whose authority?" "The Council of." "The Council has no jurisdiction here," Tobias interrupted smoothly. "This territory was granted to the Blackthorne line in perpetuity by the old treaties. As long as there's a blood heir to claim it, it remains ours." Marcus's face darkened. Kieran abandoned his birthright. "He's no alpha." "Perhaps not," Tobias agreed. "But he's not the only Blackthorne heir." All eyes turned to Sera, who was still in her shifted form, silver fur matted with blood from her shoulder wound. She could feel the weight of their attention like a physical thing, pressing down on her with expectations she didn't understand. "What's he talking about?" she asked Kieran through their bond. "Your father was my cousin," Kieran replied, his mental voice tight with strain. "Which makes you a legitimate heir to the Alpha line. If you choose to claim it." "If I choose?" The concept was so foreign she could barely process it. An hour ago she'd been human. Now they were talking about her leading a pack of werewolves? "This is ridiculous," Marcus spat. "She doesn't even know what she is." "You can't expect." "I expect nothing," Tobias said calmly. "The choice is hers to make. But until she makes it, this territory remains under Blackthorne protection." He gestured to his pack, who had spread out in a defensive formation. "I suggest you leave, Marcus. While you still can." For a moment, Sera thought Marcus might choose to fight anyway. His hands had curled into claws, and his eyes held the wild light of someone balancing on the edge of violence. But even he wasn't foolish enough to take on a dozen wolves in their own territory. "This isn't over," he snarled, beginning to back toward the forest. "The girl will have to choose eventually. And when she does..." He smiled, showing those two sharp teeth. "Well. There are worse fates than being a Shadowfang queen. He shifted back to wolf form and melted into the darkness, his two companions following. Within moments, they were gone, leaving only the lingering scent of aggression and unfulfilled threats. Tobias turned back to Sera, his expression gentling slightly. "You're injured, child. We should get you somewhere safe so you can heal properly." Sera tried to shift back to human form, but the change wouldn't come. Panic fluttered in her chest as she realized she was stuck, caught between forms with no idea how to return to her original shape. "It's all right," Kieran said, moving to her side. "First shifts are always difficult. Just breathe and let your body relax." "I can't," she replied desperately. "I don't know how." Kieran nuzzled against her neck, his touch sending warmth cascading through their bond. "Trust me. I'll help you." She felt his presence in her mind, guiding her through the process of releasing the wolf form. Gradually, her body began to shift back, muscles and bones reforming until she was human again, naked, shivering, and acutely aware of the dozen pairs of eyes watching her. Kieran quickly shifted back as well and wrapped his arms around her, lending her his warmth and his jacket. "It's okay," he murmured against her hair. "You did amazingly well for your first time." "I hurt him," she whispered, staring at her hands as if she'd never seen them before. "I tore his throat open with my teeth." "You defended yourself," Tobias corrected, approaching them slowly. "And you did it with skill that most wolves don't develop for years. Your parents would have been proud." At the mention of her parents, Sera felt something break inside her chest. "They lied to me," she said, her voice cracking. "They let me think I was human. They let me grow up feeling like a freak, like something was wrong with me." "They were trying to protect you," Kieran said gently. "The politics of our world are complicated and dangerous. They thought if they could keep you hidden until you were old enough to choose for yourself." "Choose what?" Sera pulled away from him, sudden anger giving her strength. "Choose to be a monster? Choose to turn into an animal and tear people apart with my claws?" "Choose to be free," Tobias said quietly. "Choose to be who you really are, instead of living a lie." Sera wrapped her arms around herself, feeling lost and overwhelmed. Everything she'd thought she knew about herself, about her life, had been torn away in the space of a few hours. She didn't know how to process it all, didn't know how to integrate this new reality with the person she'd been just that morning. "I need time," she said finally. "I need to think." "Of course," Tobias nodded. "But not here. This place isn't safe anymore, not after tonight. Marcus will be back, and next time he'll bring more wolves. Where am I supposed to go?" The thought of leaving her home, her life, made her feel hollow inside. "I have a job, friends, a whole life here." "You have a life with us too," Kieran said softly. "If you want it." She looked at him, really looked, taking in the concern in his amber eyes, the way he held himself as if ready to catch her if she fell. The mate bond hummed between them, a constant awareness of his presence that was both comforting and terrifying in its intensity. "What does it mean?" she asked. "This mate thing. What does it actually mean?" Kieran glanced at his uncle, who nodded encouragingly. "It means we're connected," he said carefully. "Bound together by something deeper than choice or circumstance. It means that when one of us hurts, the other feels it. When one of us is threatened, the other will fight to the death to protect them." "Like soulmates?" "More than that. Soulmates are about compatibility, about finding someone who completes you. Mates are about survival. About being two halves of something that can't exist separately." The words should have frightened her, but instead she felt a strange sense of relief. The restlessness that had plagued her for months, the sense that something vital was missing from her life, it made sense now. "And if I reject the bond?" she asked quietly. Pain flashed across Kieran's features, but his voice remained steady. "Then we'd both suffer for it. But it's your choice to make. I won't force you into anything." Tobias cleared his throat. "Perhaps we could continue this conversation somewhere warmer? And with fewer bloodstains?" Sera looked down and realized she was still bleeding from the shoulder wound Marcus had given her. The adrenaline had masked the pain, but now it was beginning to throb with each heartbeat. "I should go to a hospital," she said, pressing her hand against the wound. "No need," Tobias said. "Wolf healing is far superior to human medicine. The wound will close within hours if properly tended." He gestured toward the forest. "Our settlement isn't far. We have healers there, and it's warded against intrusion." "Settlement?" "The Blackthorne pack lands," Kieran explained. "About 10 miles north, hidden in the old-growth forest. It's been our home for over a century." Sera glanced back at her house, where she could see Maya's silhouette still pacing behind the window. The normal world seemed so far away now, like looking at a photograph of someone else's life. "What about Maya?" "She'll be worried sick. One of my pack will watch over her," Tobias promised. "Make sure she's safe." "But you can't go back there, Sera." "Not tonight, possibly not ever. Your presence would put her in danger." The finality of those words hit her like a physical blow. In the span of a few hours, she'd lost everything: her identity, her home, her normal life. The only thing she had left was the connection to Kieran, a man she'd known for less than 2 hours but who felt more familiar than her own reflection. "This is happening too fast," she whispered. Kieran moved closer, not quite touching but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. "I know. I'm sorry. If there was any other way." "But there isn't." She took a shaky breath, trying to process everything that had happened. "Someone wants to kidnap me. I'm apparently some kind of werewolf royalty, and if I don't make a choice soon, people are going to get hurt." She looked up at him, seeing her own uncertainty reflected in his eyes. "Did you know? When you were searching for me, did you know what I'd have to give up?" "I hoped it wouldn't come to this," he admitted. "I thought I'd have time to court you properly, to let you adjust to the idea gradually. I never wanted to force this choice on you. But you would have made it for me if you could." It wasn't a question, and Kieran didn't try to deny it. "Yes. Because the alternative is losing you, and that's not something I can bear." The raw honesty in his voice made her chest tighten. Through their bond, she could feel his emotions, the love, the desperation, the bone-deep fear that she would choose her human life over him. It was overwhelming and humbling and terrifying all at once. "Sera," Tobias said gently, "we really should go. Dawn approaches, and it's not safe to linger here." She nodded, knowing he was right even as part of her wanted to dig in her heels and refuse to be pushed around anymore. But the practical part of her mind, the part that had kept her alive and functioning since her parents died, recognized that she was in over her head. "All right," she said quietly. "But I want to leave Maya a note. Something to explain why I disappeared." "What will you tell her?" Kieran asked. Sera thought for a moment. "That I found out some things about my birth family, and I have to leave town for a while to sort it out." "It's not exactly a lie." "And if she doesn't believe you?" "She will. Maya knows I've been restless lately, searching for something. She'll understand that I need to follow this path, even if I can't explain where it leads." Tobias nodded approvingly. "Wise. Maintaining the illusion of normal human concerns will protect her if Marcus's people come looking." The thought of Marcus's wolves threatening Maya made Sera's newly awakened protective instincts flare. "You promise she'll be safe?" "I give you my word," Tobias said solemnly. "The Blackthorne pack protects its own, and anyone under our protection is considered pack." It wasn't everything Sera wanted, but it was enough for now. She made her way toward the house, acutely aware of the dozen wolves watching her every move. At the back door, she paused. "I'll be quick," she told Kieran. 5 minutes. "I'll be right here," he promised. The house felt strange when she slipped inside, too warm after the cool night air, too bright after the silvery moonlight, too quiet after the psychic chatter of wolf voices in her head. Maya looked up from her pacing when Sera appeared in the doorway, relief and anger warring on her face. "Thank God," Maya breathed. I was about to call the police. Where have you been? And why are you covered in blood? Sera looked down at herself, realizing she must look like she'd been through a war zone. Kieran's jacket covered most of the damage, but there were still scratches on her arms and dried blood under her fingernails. It's a long story, she said carefully. And I don't have time to explain everything. But I need to leave town for a while. Leave town? Maya's voice pitched higher. Sera, what's going on? You disappear into the woods in the middle of the night, come back looking like you've been in a fight, and now you want to leave town? I found out some things about my birth family, Sera said, sticking to the script she'd prepared. There are people I need to meet, things I need to understand about where I came from. Maya studied her face intently. This is about those dreams, isn't it? About feeling like something was missing? Yes. At least that was completely true. And you can't take me with you? Sera felt her heart break a little. Maya had been her anchor for the past 5 years, the closest thing to family she'd had since her parents died. The thought of leaving her behind felt like tearing away a piece of her soul. Not this time, she said softly. But I'll be back. I promise. Maya was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay. I don't like it, and I think you're not telling me everything, but, okay. Just promise me you'll be careful. And call me when you can. I promise. They hugged then, fiercely, and Sera had to fight back tears. When she pulled away, she saw that Maya's eyes were bright with unshed moisture too. There's something else, Maya said suddenly. Earlier tonight, before you left, I could have sworn I heard wolves howling. But that's impossible, right? There are no wolves in North Carolina. Sera's throat tightened. Maybe it was coyotes. Or someone's dogs. Maybe. But Maya didn't sound convinced. Sera quickly gathered a few belongings. Clothes, toiletries, the few photographs she had of her parents, and stuffed them into a backpack. She also grabbed the small lockbox where she kept her important documents and the emergency cache her adoptive parents had taught her to always maintain. At the last minute, she remembered the silver pendant her birth mother had left her, the only thing she had from her original family. She'd never worn it because it seemed to burn against her skin, but now she understood why. It was probably some kind of pack symbol. Ready? Kieran asked when she emerged from the house. As ready as I can be for having my entire life turned upside down. He smiled at that, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him all night. For what it's worth, I think you're handling this remarkably well. I don't feel like I'm handling it well. I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water. That's normal, Tobias said, approaching them. The first few days after awakening are always disorienting. But you have strong instincts, that's rare for someone who grew up human. As they prepared to leave, Sera took one last look at the house that had been her home for 5 years. Maya was silhouetted in the window, watching them go, and Sera raised her hand in farewell. Then they were moving into the forest, the pack flowing around them like shadows made flesh. Sera found herself walking beside Kieran, their steps naturally falling into sync despite the chaos of her thoughts. Tell me about my parents, she said quietly as they followed a barely visible trail deeper into the woods. Kieran was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy. Your father, Daniel, was my cousin and my best friend growing up. He was brilliant, not just smart, but wise in the way that made people listen when he spoke. Everyone expected him to challenge me for the alpha position when we came of age. But he didn't? No. He said he preferred being the power behind the throne to sitting on it himself. Kieran smiled sadly. He met your mother when she was visiting from the Silver Moon pack up north. Elena was radiant. Beautiful, yes, but more than that. She had this inner light that drew people to her like moths to flame. Sera touched the silver pendant through her shirt, feeling its warmth against her skin. What happened to them? The real story, not the car accident version. Tobias answered from ahead of them, his voice carrying easily through the night air. They were murdered. By Marcus's predecessor, a wolf named Victor Bloodmoon. The words hit Sera like a physical blow. Murdered? But why? Because they discovered something, Kieran said grimly. Victor had been making deals with human hunters, providing information about pack locations and weaknesses in exchange for territory and power. Daniel found evidence of the betrayal and was bringing it to me when Victor's people ambushed them. You were Alpha then? Recently crowned. 23 years old and convinced I could change the world. His laugh was bitter. Daniel's death broke something inside me. I became obsessed with revenge, with hunting down every wolf involved in the conspiracy. I lost sight of everything else, including my responsibility to find you. They walked in silence for a while, the pack moving around them with fluid grace. Sera could feel their attention on her, not hostile but intensely curious. She was an anomaly in their world, a wolf-raised human, a potential alpha who didn't know the first thing about leading. How did I end up in the human adoption system? She asked. Elena had a human friend, someone she'd saved from a car accident years earlier, Tobias explained. When she realized they were being hunted, she brought you to this woman and begged her to keep you safe. By the time we found the bodies and started looking for you, the trail had gone cold. 5 years, Sera said, more to herself than anyone else. I've been hidden for 5 years while you all thought I was dead. We hoped you weren't, Kieran corrected. But hope and certainty are different things. It wasn't until a few months ago that we caught your scent and realized the truth. What changed? Why could you find me now when you couldn't before? You started awakening, he said simply. Your wolf side began to emerge, and with it, your true scent. The magic that had been hiding you started to weaken. They crested a ridge, and suddenly the forest opened up before them into a valley that took Sera's breath away. Nestled among the trees were dozens of buildings. Some traditional log cabins, others more modern structures that seemed to grow organically from the landscape. Warm light spilled from windows, and she could see people moving between the buildings with purposeful efficiency despite the late hour. Welcome to Blackthorne Hollow, Kieran said softly. As they descended into the settlement, Sera became aware of the attention they were drawing. Wolves in both human and animal form emerged from buildings and shadows, watching their approach with a mixture of curiosity and reverence that made her uncomfortable. They're staring, she murmured. You're their future alpha, Tobias said matter-of-factly. Of course they're staring. I never said I was going to. You don't have to say it, Kieran interrupted gently. It's written in your bloodline, in the way you fought tonight, in the strength of your first shift. Whether you choose to claim the title or not, you are what you are. They approached a large building at the center of the settlement, part lodge, part fortress, with stone walls and tall windows that glowed with warm light. As they climbed the steps to the main entrance, Sera felt a strange sense of recognition, as if she'd been here before in dreams. This was my father's house, she said, not sure how she knew. Yes, Tobias confirmed. And your grandfather's before him, and his father's before that. The Blackthorne family has led this pack for 4 generations. Inside, the building was both rustic and elegant, with exposed beams and stone fireplaces but also modern amenities that spoke of careful planning and substantial resources. A fire crackled in the main room's massive hearth, and several people were waiting for them, an older woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes, a middle-aged man with the distinctive amber eyes of the Blackthorne line, and a younger woman about Sera's age with curious green eyes. Sera, Tobias said formally, allow me to introduce some of our pack. This is Dr. Margaret Winters, our healer. David Blackthorne, your father's younger brother. And Lily Ashworth, who I believe is close to your age. Dr. Winters stepped forward immediately, her professional gaze taking in Sera's injuries. That shoulder needs attention. And you look exhausted, child. When did you last eat? I don't remember, Sera admitted, suddenly realizing she was both starving and completely drained. Food first, then healing, the doctor declared briskly. Can't treat a patient who's about to collapse from hunger. As if summoned by her words, another woman emerged from what Sera assumed was the kitchen, carrying a tray laden with sandwiches, fruit, and steaming mugs of what smelled like hot chocolate spiked with something stronger. "Thank you, Helen," Tobias said warmly as the woman set the tray on a low table near the fire. Sera found herself guided to a comfortable chair, with Kieran settling nearby and the others arranging themselves in a loose circle. The food was incredible, better than anything she'd tasted in years, and she realized she was ravenous. "So," Lily said after Sera had made a significant dent in the food, "what's it like? Growing up human, I mean." "Lily," David warned gently. "It's okay," Sera said, though she wasn't sure how to answer the question. "Lonely, I guess. I always felt like I didn't quite fit, like there was something wrong with me that I couldn't figure out." "There's nothing wrong with you," Dr. Winters said firmly as she began examining Sera's shoulder. "You're just finally becoming who you were meant to be." The healing process was unlike anything Sera had experienced. Dr. Winters applied a salve that smelled of pine and herbs, then placed her hands over the wound and did something. Sera felt warmth flow into her shoulder, followed by a tingling sensation as damaged tissue began to knit itself back together. "Remarkable," the doctor murmured. "Your healing rate is exceptional, even for our kind. The wound should be fully closed by morning." "Is that unusual? For a newly awakened wolf?" "Extraordinarily so." Dr. Winters sat back, studying Sera with professional interest. "Tell me, have you experienced any other unusual symptoms recently? Heightened senses, unusual strength, prophetic dreams?" Sera thought about it. "The dreams, yes. And I've been running at night, faster than I should have been able to. My hearing's gotten sharper too, and I can smell things I never noticed before." "How long has this been going on?" "About 3 months. Since my 21st birthday." "Unusual," Tobias mused. "Most wolves begin showing signs much earlier, even those raised human. Unless," David said thoughtfully, "someone was actively suppressing her wolf side." "Elena was known for her skill with protective magic." "You think my mother put some kind of spell on me?" Sera asked. "It would make sense," Kieran said. "A way to keep you hidden not just physically but magically as well. The spell might have been designed to break down gradually as you approached full maturity. Which would explain why you're experiencing everything at once now," Dr. Winters added. "Years of suppressed wolf instincts all emerging simultaneously." Sera rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building. "This is all so much to take in." "You don't have to understand everything at once," Lily said kindly. "Most of us grew up with this knowledge gradually. You're getting a crash course." "Speaking of which," Tobias said, "we should discuss what happens next." Marcus wasn't bluffing about the law regarding unclaimed wolves. "You have until your 22nd birthday to either accept a mate bond or formally claim alpha status. Otherwise, I become fair game for any pack strong enough to take me," Sera finished. "I understand the stakes." She looked around the circle of faces, all watching her with varying degrees of hope and concern. These people were strangers, but they were also family in a way she'd never experienced. The connection she felt to them went deeper than shared genetics. It was something primal and instinctive that spoke to the wolf inside her. "What would it mean?" she asked quietly. "If I accepted the mate bond with Kieran?" "It would make you pack," Tobias said simply. "One of us, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. It would also make you our Luna, the alpha female, Kieran's partner in leadership." "And if I claimed alpha status on my own?" "Then you would lead us," David said. "The pack would be yours to command and protect. It's a heavy burden, but one you were born to carry." "Can I do both? Accept the mate bond and claim alpha status?" "Theoretically, yes," Tobias said carefully. "But it would require Kieran to formally acknowledge you as the dominant partner. Not many male alphas are willing to submit to their mates, even for love." All eyes turned to Kieran, who hadn't spoken during this exchange. He was staring into the fire, his jaw tight with concentration. "Kieran?" Sera said softly. He looked up at her, and she saw something in his amber eyes that made her breath catch, not just love, but respect. Admiration. The look of someone who had recognized his equal and wasn't threatened by her strength. "I've been alpha for 5 years," he said quietly. "And in that time I've made more mistakes than I can count. I let pride and grief cloud my judgment. I abandoned my pack when they needed me most. I let the woman I loved live as a stranger for years because I was too focused on revenge to do my job properly." He stood and moved to kneel in front of her chair, taking her hands in his. The gesture was formal, ceremonial, but the look in his eyes was purely personal. "You fought Marcus tonight with no training, no preparation, nothing but instinct and courage. You protected yourself and me with a strength I've rarely seen, even among wolves who've trained their entire lives." His voice was steady, but she could feel the emotion behind it through their bond. "If you'll have me, Sera Blackthorne, I would be honored to serve as your mate and your partner. But you will be the alpha this pack needs." The silence in the room was profound. Sera could hear her own heartbeat, could smell the wood smoke from the fire, could feel the weight of destiny settling around her shoulders like a mantle. She thought of her life 3 hours ago, safe, predictable, empty. She thought of Maya, sleeping peacefully in their little house, unaware that her roommate had just discovered she was a werewolf. She thought of Marcus's cruel smile and his promise that this wasn't over. Then she looked at Kieran, still kneeling before her with patient love in his eyes, and felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. "Yes," she said softly. "Yes to all of it." Chapter 2, The Binding. The mating ceremony took place at dawn. Sera had expected something elaborate and formal, but instead found herself standing in a circle of ancient oak trees with only the core pack members as witnesses. The rising sun painted everything in shades of gold and amber, and the morning mist curled around their feet like ethereal smoke. "The old ways are simpler," Tobias had explained when she'd asked about the lack of ceremony. "This isn't about politics or spectacle. It's about 2 souls choosing to become one." Dr. Winters had provided her with a dress, white silk that flowed like water and felt like wearing moonlight. It had belonged to her grandmother, apparently, saved for this moment that no one had been certain would ever come. Kieran stood across from her in simple black pants and a white shirt, his dark hair still damp from washing. He looked nervous, she realized with a start. This confident, powerful man who commanded respect from an entire pack of supernatural predators was nervous about marrying her. The thought should have been amusing, but instead it made her heart ache with tenderness. "Are you ready?" Tobias asked, moving to stand between them. Sera nodded, not trusting her voice. She'd barely slept, her mind spinning with everything that had happened, but her decision felt solid as bedrock. This was right. All of it, the pack, the responsibility, him. "The mating bond is sacred," Tobias began, his voice carrying the weight of ritual. "It transcends the physical, the emotional, even the spiritual. When 2 wolves choose to bind themselves together, they become something greater than the sum of their parts." He gestured for them to step closer, until they were nearly touching in the center of the circle. "Kieran Blackthorne, do you take Sera as your mate, your partner, your equal in all things? Do you promise to stand beside her in strength and in weakness, in joy and in sorrow, until the last moon fades from the sky?" "I do." His voice was steady, but Sera could feel his emotion through the bond, love so deep it took her breath away. "Sera Blackthorne, do you take Kieran as your mate, your partner, your anchor? Do you promise to share your strength with him, to trust him with your vulnerabilities, to build a life together that honors both your individual spirits and your joined souls?" "I do." The words came without hesitation, feeling as natural as breathing. "Then join hands, and let the bond be sealed." The moment their palms touched, the world exploded into sensation. Sera felt Kieran's consciousness merge with hers, felt his memories, his emotions, his very essence flowing into her mind and heart. She experienced his childhood through his eyes, felt his grief when her parents died, shared his desperate search for her over the years. And he was experiencing her memories too, her loneliness growing up, her confusion about her identity, her fear and wonder at discovering what she truly was. She felt him flinch when he experienced her pain, felt his protective instincts flare at every moment of hardship she'd endured. "My brave, beautiful mate," his voice whispered through their joined consciousness. "I'm so sorry you had to face it all alone." "I wasn't alone," she replied, understanding flooding through her. "You were always there, even when I didn't know it. Every time I felt lost, every time I needed strength, that was you, wasn't it? The bond, calling to me." "Yes. Just as you were my anchor when I wanted to lose myself to grief and rage." The connection between them deepened, becoming something permanent and unbreakable. Sera could feel Kieran's presence in her mind like a warm flame, could sense his thoughts and emotions as clearly as her own. But rather than feeling invaded, she felt complete for the first time in her life. "It is done," Tobias announced, and Sera realized the other pack members were now kneeling around them, heads bowed in a gesture of respect and submission. "Rise, Alpha," Dr. Winters said formally. "Rise, Luna. Let us well." The next few hours passed in a blur of congratulations and explanations. Sera learned about pack hierarchy, about the responsibilities of leadership, about the delicate balance of supernatural politics that governed their world. Her head spun with information about neighboring packs, ancient treaties, and the various threats they faced. "It's overwhelming now," Lily assured her as they walked through the settlement together. "But you'll adapt. Alphas always do." "How can you be so sure?" "Because you already are adapting. Look." Lily gestured around them, and Sera realized that pack members were approaching her naturally, bringing questions and concerns as if she'd been their leader for years rather than hours. A mother asked her opinion about schooling for her children. An elderly man wanted advice about a territorial dispute with neighboring hunters. A young couple sought her blessing for their own upcoming mating ceremony. And somehow, Sera found herself answering them with wisdom she didn't know she possessed, drawing on instincts that felt ancient and sure. "The alpha gift," Kieran explained when she mentioned it to him later. "Leaders are born, not made. You have the ability to see what others need, to find solutions that serve the greater good." They were alone in what had once been her father's study, surrounded by books and maps and the accumulated knowledge of generations. Sera ran her fingers along the spines of leather-bound volumes, feeling connected to ancestors she'd never known. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. "Giving up your position?" Kieran moved behind her, his arms circling her waist as he pulled her back against his chest. "Never. I was never meant to be the sole alpha, Sera. I was meant to be your partner, your support. Everything makes sense now." She leaned into his warmth, marveling at how natural it felt to be held by him. The mate bond had eliminated the awkwardness she might have expected with someone she'd known for less than 24 hours. He felt like home. "What happens now?" she asked. "With Marcus, I mean. He's not going to just give up." Kieran's arms tightened around her. "Now we prepare. The pack is strong, but Marcus has been building alliances for years. When he comes for you, and he won't come alone." "How long do we have?" "Not long. Word travels fast in our world. By now, every pack in the region knows that the Blackthorne line has awakened again." His voice grew grim. "Some will come to pledge allegiance. Others will come to challenge your right to lead." A knock on the door interrupted them, and Tobias entered with a serious expression. "We have visitors," he announced. "The Silverwood pack from the Eastern Territory. They're requesting an audience." "Friend or foe?" Sera asked. "Unknown. Alpha Catherine Silverwood is pragmatic. She'll align herself with whoever she believes is strongest." Sera took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders. "Then I suppose it's time for my first test as Alpha." The meeting took place in the Great Hall, with pack members arranged in a careful display of strength and unity. Catherine Silverwood was a woman in her 50s with silver blonde hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. She was accompanied by a small delegation, including a young man who looked enough like her to be her son. Alpha Sera, Catherine said formally, inclining her head just enough to show respect without submission. I've come to take the measure of Daniel Blackthorne's daughter. And what have you concluded? Sera asked evenly. Catherine smiled, and there was approval in the expression. That you have your father's backbone and your mother's fire. Both useful qualities in an alpha. Are you here to pledge alliance or issue challenge? Neither, at the moment. I'm here to offer information. Catherine's expression grew serious. Marcus Bloodmoon has been busy since his defeat last night. He's called in old debts, made new promises. At least 3 packs have agreed to support his claim to this territory. Sera felt Kieran's tension through their bond, but kept her own expressi. The Ravenclaw pack from the northern mountains. The Stormwind pack from the coast. And... Catherine hesitated. The Shadowmere pack from across the state border. A collective intake of breath from the assembled pack members greeted this last revelation. Sera looked to Kieran for explanation. The Shadowmere pack is ancient and powerful, he said quietly. They rarely involve themselves in territorial disputes. If Marcus has convinced them to join him, then he's offering them something significant in return, Sera finished. What could he possibly give them that would be worth their involvement? You, Catherine said bluntly. A Blackthorne alpha, bound to their pack through forced mating with one of their sons. They see it as an opportunity to expand their bloodline and their power base. The casual way she discussed Sera's potential rape and kidnapping made the younger woman's temper flare. She felt her eyes begin to glow with inner fire, felt the power that lived in her bones respond to her anger. Let them come, she said, her voice carrying an authority that made everyone in the room take notice. All of them. They'll learn the same lesson Marcus did, that Blackthorne wolves bow to no one. Catherine's smile widened, and this time it was genuinely pleased. Now that sounds like an alpha worth following. She gestured to her son. This is my heir, James. With your permission, I'd like him to remain here as a liaison between our packs. Sera studied the young man, tall, lean, with his mother's sharp features and intelligent eyes. He was handsome in a classical way, and she sensed no deception from him. More importantly, she could feel Kieran's assessment of him through their bond, cautious but not hostile. You're welcome here, she told James. But understand that if your mother's true loyalties lie elsewhere, your life will be forfeit. Understood, Alpha, he replied formally, showing no fear at the threat. Catherine stood to leave, but paused at the door. One more thing. There are rumors that Victor Bloodmoon had human allies, people in positions of power who helped cover up supernatural incidents in exchange for certain considerations. Marcus may try to leverage those connections. What kind of connections? Government officials. Military leaders. The kind of people who could make your pack disappear without anyone asking questions. With that cheerful thought, Catherine departed, leaving Sera to contemplate the scope of what she was up against. It never ends, does it? She asked Kieran as they made their way back to their private chambers. Every time I think I understand the situation, it gets more complicated. Welcome to leadership, he said wryly. The problems are infinite, the solutions are temporary, and everyone expects you to have all the answers. Do you ever miss it? Being the one in charge? He considered the question seriously. I miss the simplicity of making decisions alone. But I don't miss the isolation. Leadership is lonely when you have no one who truly understands the weight of it. They reached their room, a spacious suite that had been hastily prepared for them, with a sitting area, a large bedroom, and a private bathroom. It was beautiful in a rustic way, with stone walls and wooden beams and windows that looked out over the forest. I should check the perimeter defenses, Kieran said, though his voice suggested he'd rather stay. Later, Sera said, catching his hand. Right now, I need you here. With me. The way she said it made clear she wasn't just talking about his physical presence. The events of the past day had been overwhelming, transformative, terrifying. But through it all, he had been her constant, her anchor in a world that had been turned completely upside down. Are you all right? He asked gently, moving to cup her face in his hands. I'm scared, she admitted. Not of Marcus or his allies, but of failing. Of letting down all these people who are depending on me to know what I'm doing. You won't fail, he said with absolute certainty. You're stronger than you know, Sera. What you did last night, accepting all of this so quickly, most people would have run screaming. I thought about it, she confessed with a small smile. But you didn't. You stayed. You fought. You chose us. His thumbs brushed across her cheekbones. You chose me. Best decision I ever made, she whispered, and meant it. When he kissed her, it was with a tenderness that made her heart ache. The mate bond hummed between them, amplifying every sensation, every emotion, until she wasn't sure where she ended and he began. I love you, he murmured against her lips. I've loved you from the moment I first caught your scent on the wind. I love you too, she replied, the words feeling both new and ancient on her tongue. Even before I knew what you were to me, I felt the connection. They spent the evening talking, about her childhood, his responsibilities, the pack they would now lead together. And when they finally made love, it was with the desperate passion of two people who had found their missing piece after years of searching. Later, as they lay entwined in the darkness, Sera felt more complete than she ever had in her life. But she also felt the weight of what was coming, the knowledge that their happiness was built on borrowed time. Promise me something, she said quietly. Anything. If something happens to me, if Marcus succeeds in his plans, don't let it destroy you the way my parents' death did. The pack needs you to be strong. Kieran raised himself on one elbow to look down at her, his eyes fierce in the moonlight streaming through their window. Nothing is going to happen to you. I won't let it. You can't control everything. I can control this, he interrupted firmly. I failed to protect your parents, failed to find you when you needed me most. I won't fail again. The pain in his voice made her reach up to touch his face. Their deaths weren't your fault. You were barely more than a child yourself, thrust into a leadership role you weren't prepared for. I was old enough to do better. You were old enough to be traumatized by losing people you loved, she corrected gently. And despite everything, you kept the pack together. You kept searching for me. You didn't fail, Kieran. You just weren't given the support you needed. She felt some of the tension leave his body as her words sank in. Through their bond, she could sense the guilt and self-recrimination he'd been carrying for years beginning to ease. How did I get so lucky? He asked, pressing a soft kiss to her palm. We both got lucky, she replied. Now get some sleep. I have a feeling tomorrow is going to be interesting. She was right. Sera woke to the sound of howls echoing across the valley, not the friendly calls of her pack, but the aggressive territorial claims of intruders. She was out of bed and pulling on clothes before she was fully conscious, her newly awakened instinct screaming danger. Kieran was already moving toward the window, his body tense with alertness. 3 separate groups, he reported grimly. They've surrounded us. Sera joined him at the window and immediately understood the tactical situation. The settlement sat in a natural bowl, with only a few defensible approaches. But Marcus had positioned his forces to block all the exits, effectively trapping the Blackthorne pack. How many? She asked, her voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Hard to tell from here, but at least 40 wolves. Maybe more. They had maybe 30 pack members capable of fighting, and several of those were elderly or recovering from injuries. The odds were not good. He's forcing our hand, Sera realized. Making us come out and fight on his terms instead of giving us time to prepare. A knock on their door interrupted her thoughts. James Silverwood stood in the hallway, fully dressed and alert despite the early hour. Alpha, he said formally. My mother sent a message. The Silverwood pack stands ready to honor our alliance, but we're 6 hours away. If you can hold them off until midday. We'll hold them, Sera said with more confidence than she felt. Tell your mother we appreciate her support. Within minutes, the settlement had transformed into a fortress. Pack members moved with practiced efficiency, securing windows, distributing weapons, and taking up defensive positions. Sera was struck by how smoothly they worked together. These people had clearly prepared for this possibility. "What's the plan?" Lily asked as they gathered in the main hall. Sera looked around the circle of faces. Some young, some old, all looking to her for leadership. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders like a familiar cloak. "Marcus wants me," she said simply. "This is all about forcing me into a position where I have to surrender to protect the pack." "Which you're not going to do," Kieran said firmly. "Which I'm not going to do," she agreed. "But we need to be smart about this. He has superior numbers, but we have superior position and knowledge of the terrain." She moved to a large map of the settlement that hung on one wall, studying the approaches and defensive possibilities. Small groups, she decided. Hit-and-run tactics. Make them chase us through terrain we know better than they do. Divide their forces and pick them off piecemeal. That could work, David agreed thoughtfully. But it's risky. If we get separated and one group gets overwhelmed, then we adapt, Sera said calmly. Marcus is expecting us to either cower here until he starves us out or charge straight at him in a suicidal frontal assault. We're going to do neither. She began assigning roles, drawing on knowledge she didn't remember learning. Some part of her, the alpha part, perhaps, understood tactics and strategy with instinctive clarity. Tobias, take the elders and non-combatants to the emergency bunker. If we fail, they're your responsibility. I should be fighting with you. You should be ensuring the pack's survival, she interrupted gently. That's more important than any individual battle. The older man nodded reluctantly, understanding the logic even if he didn't like it. Dr. Winters, set up a field hospital in the inner courtyard. We're going to have casualties. Already on it, the doctor replied briskly. Everyone else, you know your assignments. Remember, we're not trying to win a pitched battle. We're trying to survive until reinforcements arrive. As the pack dispersed to their positions, Kieran caught her arm. I should be with you, he said quietly. You will be. But I need you leading the northern team. You know those trails better than anyone. Sera. I know, she said softly, understanding his fear. I'm scared too. But we can do this. Together. He kissed her then, fierce and desperate, and she poured all her love and confidence into the connection between them. Stay alive, he whispered against her lips. You too. The first attack came at dawn. Sera crouched behind a cluster of boulders on the eastern ridge, watching as a group of Ravenclaw wolves picked their way up the steep trail toward the settlement. There were 8 of them, moving in loose formation with the confidence of predators who believed they had the advantage. They were about to learn otherwise. Now, she projected to her team through the pack link. The ambush was perfectly coordinated. Sera's group emerged from concealment on 3 sides, trapping the attackers in a crossfire of claws and fangs. The battle was brief and brutal. The Ravenclaw wolves were skilled, but they had been caught completely off guard. When the dust settled, 3 of the attackers were dead and the rest were retreating down the mountain with their tails between their legs. First blood to us, Sera reported to the other teams. Eastern approach is clear. Northern team engaged, Kieran replied, his mental voice tight with concentration. They're trying to flank us through the old mining tunnels. Copy that. Pulling back to secondary positions. The battle continued throughout the morning, a deadly game of cat and mouse played across the forested mountainside. Sera's strategy was working. They were inflicting casualties while avoiding major losses of their own. But she could feel the strain beginning to tell on her people. Alpha, Lily's voice came through the link, urgent with alarm. We've got a problem. Marcus himself is leading a push up the southern trail with at least 20 wolves. Sera's blood went cold. The southern approach was the most defensible, but 20 wolves led by an experienced alpha would be nearly impossible to stop. Fall back, she ordered. All teams converge on the settlement. We make our stand there. But as she and her team raced through the forest toward home, Sera realized they might be too late. She could see smoke rising from the direction of the settlement, could hear the sounds of battle echoing across the valley. When they crested the final ridge, her worst fears were confirmed. The outer perimeter had been breached, and wolves were fighting in the streets of the settlement itself. Buildings were burning, and she could see bodies, both friend and enemy, scattered across the ground. "Kieran!" She called through the bond, desperate for some sign that he was alive. "Here," his reply came back, strained but strong. "Defending the main hall. But we can't hold much longer." Sera felt something cold and implacable settle in her chest. Marcus wanted her? Then he could have her. On her terms. "Everyone listen to me," she projected to the entire pack. "I'm going to end this. Whatever happens, don't try to help me. Trust me." Before anyone could protest, she shifted to wolf form and charged down the mountainside toward the heart of the battle. She found Marcus in the main square, standing over the bloodied form of David Blackthorne. Her uncle was still alive, she could tell, but badly injured. The sight of his pain sent rage coursing through her like liquid fire. "Marcus," she held, her voice carrying across the battlefield with supernatural force. The black wolf turned toward her, his scarred muzzle pulling back in what might have been a smile. Around them, the fighting gradually died down as both sides realized what was happening. "So," his mental voice purred with satisfaction. "The little princess finally decides to play." "Let's finish this," she replied, stalking toward him with deadly intent. "You and me. No pack, no allies. Winner takes all." Marcus's laugh was like broken glass in her mind. "You really think you can defeat me in single combat? I have decades of experience, little girl. You've been a wolf for exactly 2 days. Then you should have no trouble accepting my challenge." She could feel the attention of every wolf in the settlement focused on them now. This was it, the moment that would determine not just her fate, but the fate of everyone she'd come to love. Marcus began to shift, his wolf form dissolving into the brutally scarred man she'd met that first night. But something was different about him now, something darker and more menacing than mere aggression. "You should know," he said conversationally as his human form solidified, "that I've been enhanced since our last meeting. The Shadowmere pack has certain advantages they were willing to share." Sera could smell the wrongness on him now, something that wasn't quite wolf, wasn't quite human. Magic, but twisted and corrupt in a way that made her instincts scream warnings. "What did you do to yourself?" she asked, not bothering to shift to human form for conversation. "I made myself strong enough to claim what's mine," he replied. "You." When he moved, it was with speed that defied belief. One moment he was 20 feet away, the next his claws were raking across her ribs, sending her tumbling across the cobblestones. But Sera was no longer the confused young woman who had stumbled into the forest 2 nights ago. She rolled with the impact, using her momentum to launch herself at his legs. Her jaws closed around his ankle, and she felt bones crunch under the pressure. Marcus roared in pain and fury, grabbing her by the scruff of the neck and hurling her against the side of a building. Stars exploded across her vision, but she forced herself to keep moving. In a fight like this, hesitation meant death. She shifted mid-dodge, her wolf form flowing into her hybrid state, the shape she'd discovered during their first encounter. Larger than her pure wolf form but more agile than fully human, with claws like razors and strength that matched his enhanced abilities. "Impossible," Marcus snarled, but there was uncertainty in his mental voice now. "You can't have that much control so quickly." "I had good teachers," she replied, thinking of Kieran's patient guidance, of the pack's unwavering support. They circled each other warily now, both bleeding from multiple wounds. Sera could feel exhaustion creeping in, but she could also sense that Marcus was tiring too. Whatever enhancements he'd received came with a cost. "Last chance," he offered. "Submit to me now, and I'll let your pack live as slaves. Refuse, and I'll kill them all while you watch." Sera's response was to launch herself at his throat. The final exchange was brief but decisive. Marcus's enhanced reflexes allowed him to partially block her attack, but he couldn't stop her claws from opening his carotid artery. His own strike caught her across the chest, leaving deep furrows that would scar. But it was too little, too late. Marcus Bloodmoon collapsed to his knees, blood pumping from his throat with each weakening heartbeat. His eyes held shock and fury right up until the moment they went dark. Sera stood over his body, swaying with exhaustion and blood loss, but alive. Around the square, the remaining Shadowfang wolves were backing away, their leader's death releasing them from any obligation to continue fighting. "It's over," she projected to the gathered packs. "Any who wish to leave may do so in peace. Any who wish to stay and swear allegiance to the Blackthorne pack are welcome." Most of the enemy wolves chose to leave, but several, particularly from the Ravenclaw pack, approached with submission postures that indicated their desire to join the winning side. Sera barely noticed. She was focused entirely on the familiar figure running toward her across the square, Kieran, battered and bloodied but wonderfully, miraculously alive. When he reached her, she collapsed into his arms, finally allowing herself to feel the full extent of her injuries. But even as Dr. Winters rushed to tend her wounds, even as the pack gathered around them in celebration and relief, Sera felt a deep sense of completion. She was home. She was whole. And she was exactly where she was meant to be. "My fierce, incredible mate," Kieran whispered through their bond as consciousness began to fade around the edges. "My alpha." "Yours," she agreed, letting herself sink into the healing darkness. "Always yours." Epilogue, 6 months later. Sera stood on the balcony of the rebuilt main hall, watching the sun set over Blackthorne Hollow. The settlement had been restored to its former beauty, with new buildings rising alongside the old ones. More importantly, it had grown. The pack now included wolves from 6 different territories, all drawn by the promise of strong leadership and a chance to be part of something greater. "Admiring your kingdom?" Kieran asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Our kingdom," she corrected, leaning back against his warmth. "And I was actually thinking about Maya." They'd managed to reconnect with her old roommate a month ago, carefully revealing the truth about Sera's heritage and new life. Maya had taken it surprisingly well, all things considered. "She's happy for you," Kieran reminded her. "A little overwhelmed, but happy." "I know. It's just strange, having a foot in both worlds now." "Speaking of which," Kieran said, his voice taking on a teasing note, "Catherine Silverwood called. Apparently there's been some unusual activity near the Canadian border. She thinks it might be worth investigating." Sera groaned. "Please tell me we're not about to get dragged into some international incident." "Would it matter if we were? You'd handle it the same way you handle everything else, with courage, wisdom, and an alarming tendency to throw yourself into mortal danger." "Hey, I've gotten much better about the mortal danger thing." "You have," he agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You've gotten better at a lot of things." She had. The awkward, uncertain young woman who'd stumbled into the forest 6 months ago had been replaced by someone confident in her own skin, comfortable with her power, secure in her place in the world. She'd found her pack, her purpose, and her mate. She'd found herself. "No regrets?" Kieran asked softly, as if reading her thoughts. Sera turned in his arms to face him, seeing her own contentment reflected in his amber eyes. "None," she said firmly. "This is exactly the life I was meant to live. Even though it means danger, responsibility, impossible decisions. Even though it means all of that." She rose on her toes to kiss him, feeling the mate bond hum with perfect harmony between them. "I was born human, but my destiny was always wolf. I just needed you to help me remember." As the last light faded from the sky and the first stars began to appear, they stood together on their balcony, surrounded by the sounds of their thriving pack. Somewhere in the distance, wolves were beginning their nightly songs, their voices weaving together in harmonies that spoke of home, of family, of belonging. Sera added her own voice to the chorus, her howl carrying across the valley with joy and power and the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. She was Sera Blackthorne, alpha of the Blackthorne pack, mate to Kieran, protector of all who sought her shelter. She was finally, completely, perfectly herself. The end.